Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going to be taking a look at Islam.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting mix of stuff to work with today.
We do. We've got like the foundational Wikipedia articles, to kind of set the stage.
We do?
But then we've got some YouTube videos with all sorts of different perspectives.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to kind of like piece it all together.
It is. It's like a giant puzzle, right?
Yeah, totally.
So hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much better understanding of Islam.
Yeah, like a well-rounded understanding, origins, core beliefs.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, some of the controversies surrounding it too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Let's go back to the 5 pillars of Islam. This history article we have does like a really good job of explaining them, like Islam 101.
Yeah, think of it as the bedrock, the foundation of Muslim life.
Okay, cool. So the first pillar is the Shahada, which is the declaration of faith.
Right.
There is no deity but God, and
Wow.
Muhammad is the messenger of God.
Such a powerful statement.
It is super simple.
But then how much it encapsulates, right? Like that's the core of Islamic belief right there.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that like one statement covers both like the oneness of God, but also the accepting Muhammad as the prophet.
Right.
Okay, so then we have Salat, which is the 5 daily prayers.
Right.
Facing Mecca. Specific times throughout the day. It's a ritual that connects Muslims to God.
It's more than just like going through the motions though, right? It's really about, cultivating mindfulness and gratitude throughout the day.
Yes, it's more than just like the physical act of prayer.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so next we have Zakat, which is almsgiving.
Yes.
Muslims are obligated to give a portion of their wealth to help those in need.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful emphasis on social responsibility, right? Like sharing your blessings, taking care of the less fortunate.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and then there's Psalm fasting during Ramadan.
Yes.
No food or drink from dawn till dusk.
Yeah, that takes some serious self-discipline.
I can't even imagine.
But it's a really powerful spiritual practice found in many different religions.
Yeah.
Really about like reflecting on yourself, purifying yourself, drawing closer to God.
Yeah.
And also remembering those who are less fortunate than yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and last but not least, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca.
Right. Every Muslim who's able-bodied and can afford it is expected to make that journey at least once in their lifetime.
Yeah, what an experience that must be.
It is. It's such a powerful experience.
Yeah.
It's both physical and spiritual.
Yeah.
Muslims from all over the world coming together.
Yeah, and standing shoulder to shoulder, like regardless of background or social status.
Exactly.
It's pretty cool.
It's a beautiful reminder of the shared faith and purpose.
Yeah. It's interesting looking at these 5 pillars together. It's not just about like individual piety.
Totally.
There's like a big emphasis on community and social responsibility woven throughout.
Yeah, I think that's really at the heart of, Islamic practice.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the basics down. Now let's talk about the man at the heart of it all.
Okay.
Muhammad. So our sources kind of paint a picture of him as an orphan, disillusioned with the polytheism and social injustices of his time.
Yeah.
He was seeking solace in spiritual contemplation.
Uh-huh.
And that's when he received his first revelation, right?
Yes, according to Islamic tradition, that's exactly right. And this is where the concept of Muhammad as the seal of the prophets comes in.
Yeah.
So Muslims believe that he's the final messenger of God.
Wow.
And the Quran, which is the holy book of Islam, is believed to be the literal word of God as revealed through him.
So speaking of the Quran, the Wikipedia article on it mentions how it was standardized really early on.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating.
Like surprisingly early.
Yeah, within 20 years of Muhammad's death.
That's crazy.
Like the Uthmanic Codex became the definitive version and other versions were actually destroyed. This standardization was really important because it helped unify the Muslim community around a single authoritative text.
Okay, so even with that early standardization, there's still debate about the Quran's interpretation.
Right, of course.
Like, for example, this whole concept of abrogation, where later revelations can supersede earlier ones.
Right.
That's confusing.
It's definitely a complex issue, one that's been debated among scholars for centuries.
Yeah, like, okay, so for example, the stoning punishment for adultery.
Right.
That's not actually mentioned in the current Quran.
Right. It's thought to have been abrogated.
But it's derived from other Islamic texts.
Yeah.
So how do Muslims, like, reconcile that?
It's a really good question. It's a really big question, and it really gets at the heart of how Muslims approach the Quran and how these different interpretations really impact their daily lives and their understanding of their faith.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's step into some controversial territory now.
Okay.
One of the most debated stories surrounding the Quran is the satanic verses incident.
Yeah, this is where things get a little tricky.
Yeah, I remember reading this and I was like, wait, what?
It's a really strange story. So this account suggests that Muhammad initially considered incorporating pagan goddesses into Islam,
What?
only to later retract those verses, claiming they were whispered to him by Satan.
Wow.
So this story has been used by critics to question the divine origin of the Quran.
Yeah, I can see why.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there are all these accusations of the Quran borrowing from earlier Jewish and Christian sources.
Right.
Like the story of Cain and Abel, which appears in the Quran,
Yeah.
bears a pretty striking resemblance to the biblical account.
Yeah, and there are other parallels too, like stories about Noah's Ark, the Exodus,
Yeah.
key figures like Abraham and Jesus,
Yeah.
who are revered in Islam and Christianity. So these similarities have led some scholars to question the Quran's originality.
Yeah, it feels like we're trying to untangle a giant knot of influences and connections between these different religious texts.
It's like peeling back layers of history
It is.
and really understanding, how these religions are connected.
Yeah.
They don't exist in a vacuum. They influence each other. They borrow from each other.
Totally.
They engage in dialogue, sometimes harmonious, sometimes contentious.
Right. So as we delve into all these critiques, it's important to remember that interpretations and practices vary within Islam.
Of course.
And not all Muslims agree on every point.
Absolutely. We have to remember that there's so much diversity of thought within the Muslim world.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit and compare Islam with other Abrahamic faiths, especially Christianity.
Okay.
One of the most striking differences, I think, is their view of Jesus.
Yeah, that's a really key distinction. So in Islam, Jesus is revered as a prophet, but not as the Son of God. Muslims believe he was miraculously born to the side. Virgin Mary performed miracles and will return at the end of time. However, they deny his crucifixion and resurrection, seeing those as distortions of the true message.
Right, and we see this contrasting perspective in the YouTube video by Mario Manuel. He really emphasizes the Christian belief in Jesus as the only true God, the source of salvation and peace.
Right, and this difference in interpretation has fueled centuries of debate.
It has.
And unfortunately, conflict.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just about Christianity. Within Islam itself, different sects have emerged over time.
Right.
With, different interpretations and practices.
Yeah, the two main branches, Sunni and Shia, have their own distinct beliefs about leadership and religious authority.
Right, so the split between Sunni and Shia stems from who should succeed Muhammad after his death.
Exactly.
And that's had a huge impact on the history and development of Islam.
Absolutely. Different schools of thought, different legal systems, and even political conflict.
So even within Islam, there's a whole spectrum of beliefs and interpretations.
Absolutely. It's such a diverse and complex faith.
Yeah, so trying to define Islam as one monolithic thing is just a vast oversimplification.
I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about how Islam is perceived and practiced in the modern world.
Okay.
One issue that always seems to come up is the question of violence sparked by the religion.
Right.
The real reason Muhammad hated Jews and preached genocide. YouTube video really dives into this.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that this is a very specific and controversial perspective.
It is. But it's important to understand how some interpretations of Islamic scripture have been used to justify violence against those perceived as enemies.
Right.
So this is a complex and sensitive issue.
It is.
With really deep historical roots.
Okay, another controversial claim we came across is this idea that Muslim countries are doomed to poverty.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is?
And while it's true that many Muslim-majority countries face economic challenges, attributing this solely to their religion just ignores the complexities of history, politics, and economics.
Right. It's way too much of a generalization to say that.
Yeah, we really need to move beyond those reductive narratives and engage with the actual realities on the ground.
Yeah. And speaking of realities on the ground, we need to understand why people choose to convert to or leave Islam.
Absolutely.
We heard a really powerful story in the Apostate Prophet video about the creator's aunt who was killed in an honor killing.
Yeah.
And how that completely impacted his faith journey.
It's a tragic reminder that the consequences of religious belief or disbelief can be very real.
Yeah.
Especially in contexts where religious conformity is strictly enforced.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've covered so much ground here.
We have.
From like the foundational pillars of Islam to the controversy surrounding the Quran,
Yeah.
the diverse viewpoints within and outside the faith.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
It does feel like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good starting point.
I agree.
What are your initial thoughts? What's sparking your curiosity?
I think what really strikes me is the sheer diversity of perspectives we're encountering. Even within Islam, there's such a range of interpretations and practices.
Yeah.
And I think understanding that nuance is really key to having a balanced perspective.
I agree with that. It's like this giant, intricate tapestry, and we're just starting to appreciate its complexity.
Yeah, and there's so much more to explore.
Yeah, there is.
There really is so much more. And it's like
Yeah.
we're only looking at one tiny piece
Yeah.
of this massive puzzle.
It's like trying to understand an entire ecosystem by looking at a single leaf.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's zoom back in on Muhammad for a second.
Okay.
This Wikipedia article mentions that he faced some serious resistance in Mecca when he first started preaching.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Kind of have that classic underdog story,
He does.
like the lone voice challenging the status quo.
It's really fascinating, though, how his message resonated with people despite all that resistance.
It is.
He was offering, a message of monotheism, social justice, spiritual renewal.
Right.
That really appealed to those who were, feeling marginalized or disillusioned by the existing power structures in Mecca at the time.
Yeah, and that moment when he stood up to the Quraysh and said, "I bring you slaughter." Talk about a power move.
Oh, yeah, that was intense.
That must have been a turning point in his story.
It was a really bold move, and I think it reflects the growing tension between Muhammad and the Meccan establishment.
Right.
And this ultimately led to his emigration to Medina, which is known as the Hijra,
Right.
which marks a really pivotal moment in Islamic history.
Wait, before we move on to Medina,
Yeah.
there's this one interesting story about Muhammad kissing the black stone during the tawaf.
Yeah.
Even though he was preaching against idolatry. It just made me pause and think, that's interesting.
Yeah, it reminds us that the transition from polytheism to monotheism wasn't always, a clean break.
Right.
Old habits and rituals sometimes lingered, and even Muhammad, as the prophet of Islam, might have navigated those complexities. The tawaf, by the way, is the ritual circumambulation of the Kaaba,
Right.
which is in Mecca. It's a practice that actually predates Islam.
So it's like a snapshot of a religion in its early years,
Yeah.
grappling with the old and the new, trying to find its footing.
Totally. Like, religion is a living, evolving thing.
Right.
And the early days of Islam were a period of intense change and adaptation.
For sure. Okay, let's go back to those accusations about the Quran being influenced by earlier sources.
Okay.
The criticism of the Quran Wikipedia article mentions how the story of Cain and Abel, which is in the Quran, is really similar to the biblical account.
It is. And it's not the only example either.
Right.
There are other parallels, too.
Yeah.
So these similarities have led some scholars to question the Quran's claim to originality.
Yeah, it's like a giant knot.
It is.
To figure out what influenced what.
It really highlights how, religions don't exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
They influence each other. They borrow from each other.
They're in constant dialogue.
Exactly. Sometimes harmonious, sometimes contentious.
Yeah. Okay, let's dive into some of the more challenging aspects of Islam that our sources bring up. The Apostate Prophet video talks about this tragic story of the Creator's aunt being killed in an honor killing.
Yeah.
And the impact it had on his own journey with faith.
That's a really heartbreaking example of the dark side of religious extremism.
It is.
So honor killings, although condemned by many Muslims, are a horrific reality in some parts of the world.
Right.
Often rooted in these really distorted interpretations of religious and cultural norms.
Yeah, it's a reminder that religion can be a force for both good and evil.
Absolutely.
And that critical thinking and compassion are so important when we're navigating these complexities.
Couldn't agree more.
It's not about blindly accepting everything you hear.
Right.
It's about engaging with these difficult topics.
Yes.
And challenging the harmful interpretations.
Absolutely. We can't shy away from those difficult conversations.
Yeah. What about the claims in that Acts 17 polemics video about Muhammad's views on Jews?
Right.
This video argues that there's a history of anti-Semitism within Islam.
Yeah.
Stemming from Muhammad's own actions and teachings.
This is a really sensitive and controversial topic.
It is.
And it's important to remember that the video is presenting a very specific and highly contested interpretation of Islamic history.
Right.
But I think it's undeniable that there have been instances of violence and persecution against Jews throughout history.
Yeah.
Often fueled by religious intolerance.
It's a complicated and painful history. It's hard to even know where to begin.
You're right. It's a tangled web.
It is.
And that's why we need to approach these issues with open minds and a willingness to engage with different perspectives. It's not about taking sides.
Right.
It's about seeking understanding and fostering dialogue, even when it's uncomfortable.
Okay, so we've talked about some critiques of Islam, both historical and contemporary.
Right.
But what about those who find meaning and purpose in the religion?
Right.
Like, why do people convert to Islam?
Well, there are many reasons. Some people are drawn to the simplicity and the clarity of its message. The emphasis on, submission to God and the structured rituals that provide a sense of spiritual grounding.
Okay.
Others find comfort and community in the strong social bonds and the sense of belonging that Islam offers.
Yeah, and we see this in the Apologetics Roadshow video.
Right.
Where Destiny, this popular streamer, says that, he'd personally choose Christianity.
Yeah.
Because he admires Jesus's character.
Right.
But he acknowledges that a lot of people find meaning and purpose in Islam.
Yeah, it really comes down to what resonates with you on a personal level.
Yeah, for sure.
The human search for meaning is a deeply personal journey.
It is.
And different paths resonate with different individuals.
Yeah, and what matters is respecting those choices.
Exactly.
And engaging in respectful dialogue, even when we disagree.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay. It's also amazing how quickly Islam spread across the globe.
It is.
The Islam Wikipedia article talks about, the expansion through conquests and trade and missionary activities.
It's a remarkable story of religious and cultural diffusion.
It is.
Islam's message resonated with such diverse populations.
It did.
From the deserts of Arabia to the bustling cities of Persia and beyond.
Right.
And it wasn't just about military might.
Yeah.
Islamic scholars and traders played a huge role in transmitting knowledge and ideas and practices that shape societies far and wide.
It's like this ripple effect.
It is.
That started in one corner of the world and then spread outward, transforming cultures, leaving this indelible mark on history.
And that impact continues to this day.
It does.
Islam is a global religion with a rich and complex history, a tapestry woven from diverse threads of faith and culture and politics.
Yeah, and we're getting a glimpse of that tapestry through these sources.
We are.
With all its beauty and contradictions and challenges.
It's been quite a journey so far.
Yes. And we're not done yet. There's still so much more to explore.
Yeah, it really is amazing to see how widespread and diverse the Muslim world is.
It is. Over 1.9 billion Muslims across the globe.
Yeah, and 49 countries where Islam is the majority religion. It's a global force to be reckoned with.
It really is. And that global presence, brings with it a whole host of challenges and opportunities.
It does.
How do Muslims navigate their faith in a rapidly changing world?
Right.
How do they reconcile their beliefs with modern values and ideologies?
Yeah, those are questions that are constantly being debated and discussed.
For sure. It's not just about, ancient history and theological debates.
Right.
Islam is a living, breathing faith that's dealing with contemporary issues like globalization, technology, social change.
It's constantly evolving and adapting.
Yeah, and within those broader currents, we see those individual stories of faith, doubt, struggle, and triumph.
Yeah.
Like in the Dennis Falcon video, for example. This man was disowned by his Muslim parents for converting to Christianity.
Yeah, that's a really powerful reminder of the personal costs that some people face for following their conscience.
It is.
Especially when it clashes with, deeply held family and community beliefs.
Right.
And it really highlights the tension between individual freedom and religious conformity.
Yeah.
Which is a tension that we see playing out all over the world.
For sure. So we've talked about conversions out of Islam.
Right.
But what about those who choose to convert to the faith?
Right.
What motivates them?
Well, there are lots of different reasons. Some people are drawn to the spiritual teachings and practices of Islam.
Okay.
They find peace and solace in its message of submission to God.
Okay.
Others might be attracted to the strong sense of community and the emphasis on social justice that are really central to Islamic teachings.
Right.
And then others convert for more personal reasons.
Okay.
Like marriage or a sense of belonging.
So it's like this huge tapestry of individual journeys.
It is.
Each thread kind of adding to the rich and complex fabric of Islam.
And that tapestry is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
As Muslims around the world interpret and practice their faith in ways that reflect their own unique contexts and experiences.
Yeah, it's a dynamic and vibrant faith. It's constantly engaging with the challenges and opportunities of the modern world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Islam, let's try to distill some key takeaways for our listeners. We've covered so much.
We have.
From the 5 pillars to the controversies surrounding the Quran, the life of Muhammad faith, the diverse viewpoints within and outside of the faith.
Right.
What does it all mean? What are the big aha moments here?
I think if we take a step back and look at all the threads that we've pulled on, one of the most important takeaways is that Islam, like any religion, is not a monolithic entity.
Right.
It's a vibrant, diverse faith with a rich history, a range of interpretations, a global impact that continues to shape our world today.
It does.
It's not about fitting Islam into a neat little box.
Right.
It's about appreciating its complexities and its contradictions.
Exactly. So our goal today wasn't to give you a definitive answer about Islam. It was to give you the knowledge and the critical thinking skills to go on your own journey of exploration.
Right. To spark your curiosity, encourage you to ask questions, and empower you to dig a little deeper.
For sure. So here's a final thought to ponder as you continue your exploration.
Okay.
If the Quran was compiled and standardized so early in Islamic history, why are there still textual variations and debates about its interpretation today?
That's a really good question.
It is a good question. It kind of speaks to the dynamic nature of faith, the enduring power of Scripture, and the human search for meaning.
It does.
In a complex and ever-changing world. So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep. And thanks for joining us for the deep dive into Islam.
Thanks, everyone.